Welcome to another critical view of a particular aspect of anime culture. In my last video I discussed monogatari, lolis, and the objectified female character in anime, but in this video we'll look at a specific subtype of animanga, BL. BL is an acronym for boys love, and it's a genre of storytelling that focuses on the intimate relationships between two people identifying as men. The stories can either be categorized as a romance or be part of other genres such as adventure, horror, it can be anything. But the thing is that they always include a romantic storyline between men. I believe everyone who is familiar with anime and manga has come across BL material in one way or another, as there might be original stories or even fanfiction of popular characters from other animanga. The twist regarding BL is that instead of marketing such content to the expected demographic, like gay men, BL is predominantly written by and marketed toward women. If you didn't know already, in Japan BL is part of the shoujo/joshi demographic category, which describes magazines and publishers advertising their stories to women. Now, does that mean that only women read BL? Of course not. Men and non-binary people are just as likely to indulge in BL, just like they enjoy other shoujo stories in general. If you want to know more about what shoujo/joshi actually means, because a lot of people think it's just romance, when it clearly isn't, I would highly recommend that you watch the video The Diversity of Shoujo Manga on Colleen's Manga Rex channel that I've linked in the description below. Their videos are top tier anyway, so I highly recommend that you check out their channel. But anyway, there are two reasons that I pointed out that BL is written by and marketed toward women. Number one, I want to respect the history of the genre overall, and number two, it is actually relevant to the controversy that can surround it. You see, the BL fandom tends to receive accusations of fetishization and misrepresentation of gay men, especially when the material is written and consumed by women. I wanted to participate in the debate by examining some of the reasons women may enjoy BL, as well as a few of the adjacent arguments against that habit. I have certainly not covered all aspects of the discussion in the video, and I would love to do another video on BL, specifically regarding the topic of misogyny and lesbophobia. But for today, I will focus on the gay representation aspect and the portrayal of queer relationships. All of the research articles I consulted are cited in the description below, but unfortunately I could not find as many Japanese academics as I wanted. Although BL certainly qualifies as a cultural phenomenon, it has not been thoroughly studied by Japanese academics. This has been attributed to a reluctance to seriously examining sexuality in popular culture, especially when it concerns women. However, serious efforts have been made by certain academics to study BL and its main drivers. One such author is Kazumi Nagaike, who particularly sought out to study fujoshi and fudanshi, aka rotten girls and rotten boys, which are terms describing female and male fans of BL. I highly recommend you check out her books and articles. Okay. Before we jump into the main debate, let's clarify the terminology and history pertinent to the genre. First of all, let's address why I'm referring to it as BL instead of other terms you might have seen online, such as shounen-ai or yaoi maybe. The terms shounen-ai and BL basically mean the same thing, and they refer to stories dwelling on the love between two or more male protagonists. Now, yaoi is an acronym of the Japanese phrase yamanashi, ochinashi, and iminashi, which roughly translates to no climax, no point, no meaning. By the way, please don't make fun of me for the pronunciation, thank you. That phrase characterizes stories that focus on smut rather than developing a plot. In short, shounen-ai and BL can include some smut, but not always. Yaoi is just smut. I refer to it as BL because it encompasses all material under the male homosexual romance category, and it's just an easy acronym to use, to be honest. In terms of BL history, I will briefly outline some key facts that I collected through research. However, I want to point out that I am not an expert, and I certainly am not aware of all or even most BL stories out there. I have read a fair few, but I certainly would not describe myself as a BL connoisseur or anything like that. Okay, sorry, back to the history. The first published BL stories were reportedly written by female artists after they were finally able to get some opportunities in the post-World War II manga industry. Of course, that industry was not always welcoming to women, but following the 1960s, publishers realized that female audiences have consuming potential. There was a big gap for material that appealed to women. Such material ended up including romance between gay men. The first published BL mangaka was named Takemiya Keiko, who became known for her 17-volume BL, Kazetoki no Uta, and for challenging both sexual and gender norms at the time. It's also important to note that the majority of BL was shared in doujinshi events, where people publish and distribute their stories on their own without a commercial publisher. It's not surprising that a lot of doujinshi writers were women and that a lot of doujinshi material was BL, as the commercial publishers mostly focused on shonen/seinen, written of course by male mangaka. Although it was and still is very rare for BL to get commercially published and be potentially animated, some doujinshi BL mangaka managed to break through. Nakamura Shugeku's Junjou Romantica was a doujinshi and it ended up being commercially published, animated, and even broadcasted on TV. Now, mind you, while these BL stories mostly centered pure romantic gay love, they also included dark themes such as incest, pedophilia, drug use, and even sexually exploited children. It seems that even historically, BL writers always pushed the boundaries of storytelling and tried to address taboo themes that society would rather ignore in favor of escapism. If it wasn't obvious already, the controversy adjacent to BL is relevant to its consumption by women and the portrayal of such themes. In this video, we will try to understand why women may want to read about boys loving boys, as well as why certain portrayals of gay love can be seen as problematic. Section 1. Gender in BL and the absent sword. The concept of women reading BL has been discussed as a form of escapism, which is not that unusual in the world of literature. People read all sorts of literary entertainment to escape their everyday lives and unwind in a fictional world. However, it would be considered more quote-unquote normal to read stories involving protagonists whose gender they are sharing, simply based on the assumption that a character with the same gender will be more relatable to them. Well, there are actually a lot of reasons women might enjoy reading stories who completely exclude female characters. One of those reasons is gender performance. The reason women with diverse interests, gender expressions, and sexualities can all enjoy BL is because of its general lack of heteronormativity. The characters are loosely presented as two gay men, but they do not always perform in a stereotypical, gender-specific way. One recurring type of BL character is the so-called beautiful boy. Just like the term describes, that character is presented as very attractive, but abiding to mostly feminine ideals of beauty. More specifically, a slender figure, big sparkly eyes, and gentle mannerisms. The beautiful boy character tends to become a self-insert for the female reader, whether the author intended this or not. I actually would dare to say that most of the time it is purposeful, as the manga is written to appeal to women and young girls. But does that mean that this gay man represents, quote-unquote, the woman? Well, yes and no. Although gay men who act more effeminate are often stripped of their masculinity due to derogation, the beautiful boys are not written to be mocked or belittled, but to be somewhat envied. Literary analysts, in a lot of the sources I have cited, believe that they actually represent an idealized version of the reader's self that defies gender expectations. This becomes clear when a cis female character appears in BL stories, and instead of being similar to the protagonist, they are immediately differentiated due to their more obvious and stereotypical femininity. The beautiful boy is not a woman, but he is not exactly a man either, as there are characters who engage in more traditional masculinity within the story. Their androgynous beauty is further amplified by the distinct lack of lower parts. A lot of BL stories are completely PG and lack explicit content. This allows the reader to indulge in the character's emotional intimacy without the complication of sexual intimacy. This makes the story appealing to people of all ages, maturity levels, and sexualities. Reading about love and human connection is easy when you do not have to think about the intimidating world of physical intimacy. However, a lot of BL includes explicit content, albeit partially censored. Nowadays, it isn't uncommon to read BL with fully sketched swords or lightsabers, but earlier BL stories, and several contemporary ones too, tend to leave these lower areas undefined. This not only allowed readers to use their personal imagination, but it further established the BL characters as some of the first gender non-conforming characters in Japanese manga. Before you freak out, don't worry, I will discuss the negative aspects of such gender portrayal in the second part of the video. Although I mentioned that BL tries to avoid heteronormativity, it does unfortunately include some inherently heteronormative ideas about gender and romance. But more on that later. Let's now discuss sexuality in BL and queer desires. Another justification for women's unexpected love for BL is that it gives them the ability to explore their sexual desires outside of patriarchal norms. Female analysts of BL in Japan have described women's desires as significantly restricted, and female agency in sexual scenarios has been considerably underrepresented. The female reader can mentally liberate herself from those restrictions by using the male body as a device of exploration. In addition to sexual desire, male-on-male love is also used to purify the concept of love and romantic relationships. women can experience disappointment and disillusionment with heterosexual love in their real lives, either due to personal experience or due to the patriarchy's rules about female-male relationships. That disillusionment can make their consumption of male-on-male love more comforting and appealing. But it is not just quote-unquote heterosexual women who enjoy BL. Whilst it may sound surprising, several queer women have actually named BL and other gender non-conforming manga as influences during their formative years. First of all, BL takes place in a queer world, and the male protagonists often defy patriarchal expectations. This setting must already feel familiar to women coming to terms with their own sexuality. Furthermore, it is important to remember that sexuality is not easily determined. Maybe most women reading BL have only dated men, or maybe they have made no comment about their sexual orientation. Still, they do participate in a circle of queer culture just by enjoying BL. Does that mean that they want to identify as gay? No, and I would never make that assumption against their will. However, it's not usually as simple as saying straight girls love to spend hours and money on love stories between two men. There has to be a deeper level to this discussion. I would also like to add that the assumption that most fans of BL are straight is quite outdated, and more recent interpretations and surveys conducted in the population have revealed that there is a pretty equal ratio of queer women and generally heterosexual women. Second of all, even if it involves two masc-presenting characters, the sexuality portrayed may still appeal to feminine audiences. In his article, James Wecker reveals that a woman he interviewed recalled herself and her female friends reenacting the love scenes depicted in the BL manga Kazetoki no Uta. It seems that the fascination with BL breaks down our societal expectations regarding gender and sexuality, and more specifically the existence of a gender binary and exclusive sexuality. It solidifies that these two concepts are spectrums rather than exclusive categories. Remember that BL emerged during an era where the ultra-masculine man was portrayed as the ideal patriarch, and these androgynous characters who break down gender norms go against that very ideal. It's not just some people like masculine men and some people like feminine ones, it's a statement against enforced gender expectations. Part of the reason that this statement is so controversial could also be attributed to the double standard by which women's desires are viewed. Women's desires are arguably more harshly criticized and looked down upon by general society. As I mentioned earlier, the explicit sexual imagery in BL and its consumption by female readers do challenge our heteronormative ideas of gender and sexuality. But there are also some justified criticisms of BL. In this section, I will discuss 3 core issues that stem from BL literary culture. Number 1. Back to heteronormativity. Yuke or Seme? The concept of a Yuke and Seme in BL is pretty much cemented in the fandom because there are key tropes characterizing the characters. Since being a Yuke or Seme is a trope, there are also certain expectations that come with being one or the other. By the way, if you didn't know already, the Yuke is the bottom and the Seme is the top in a queer relationship. The top is expected to act a certain way, and the bottom is expected to act another. This can be considered problematic when you understand the heteronormative implications. You see, a lot of stories have been accused of mimicking a monogamous heterosexual relationship rather than a queer one. More specifically, the Yuke tends to be portrayed as more delicate, feminine, and vulnerable, while the Seme is more aggressive, cold-hearted, and protective. In the real world, there can be all sorts of sexual roles between a couple. But this specific and very common portrayal can reinforce the heterosexist assumption that being penetrated is inherently feminizing. We have all heard the incredibly offensive question thrown at male gay couples, like which one of you is the woman? Women are expected to have a more passive role in intimacy, which is an expectation enforced on the bottom of the gay couple. Another issue with the Yuke and Seme dichotomy is the traumatic storylines associated with each character. While characters having trauma from past experiences is nothing new in the world of romance, there is an alarmingly high rate of BL stories that include SA as such trauma. Of course, raising awareness about SA, especially in the LGBTQ+ community, is not inherently negative nor taboo. These themes should be discussed in order to be fought against. However, it's very common that the Yuke will be the one experiencing or having experienced SA. The association between the passive, more feminine character and SA raises a lot of eyebrows about the prejudice and societal assumptions regarding SA survivors. The SA'd Yuke is usually portrayed as a delicate and beautiful person who trusts people too much and gets themselves in bad situations due to their naivete. The offenders in BL are typically evil individuals who are immediately established as deviants and menacing. Such portrayal of SA can happen in real life, but it is not the most common SA scenario. You see, I believe we all know that most essay occurs by a partner or ex-partner, as well as by relatives and close acquaintances. It is the people that we know, spend our lives with, and share our worries with that could potentially target us. On the other hand, when the seme who is supposed to be the romantic lead assaults the yuge, we are supposed to believe that they do it out of hyperbolic love or lust, and we should still root for their relationship because love will make the seme soften up. If you're a younger person reading this, the lesson you will learn is that sometimes love hurts and you gotta endure it in order to get the good treatment. If you're an adult reading this, you hopefully know that the seme is in the wrong and you don't get that harmful lesson. But you do participate in this system of grape culture. Am I saying that you should stop reading or that you are to blame for all essay? Of course not. We can read and enjoy whatever we like in our own heads. But it's important that we self-assess our habits and that we are honest about the negative repercussions certain entertainment works can have. This isn't about getting cancelled or posting an apology about reading toxic love BL, but this discussion is about our internal critical examination of our interests and beliefs. Now, finally, I want to point out that there are a lot of BL stories out there that do not run into that issue. A lot of BL romance stories either address SA properly or focus on a love story between two people who are not toxic to each other. Number 2. Fetishization. Queer or straight entertainment. While the popularity of BL has certainly pushed the LGBTQ+ movement forward in the entertainment industry and has certainly helped normalize homosexual relationships, there are issues with that sort of progress. Firstly, homosexuality is accepted in mostly a fictional and literary context. The BL fandom is mostly focused on these works of fiction, and their discussion can center around the favorite characters, type of characters, and favorite storylines. While this looks like acceptance of male gay couples, I certainly wouldn't call it activism. As I discussed earlier, a lot of BL works suffer from heteronormative stereotypes that have been so ingrained in the genre that they have become expected tropes. Discussing whether you prefer seme or yuge characters does not make you an ally or acceptant of gay men, it makes you a fan of a piece of media. What I'm saying is, the homosexual behavior that BL fans consider desirable is not necessarily the real-life experience of queer people across the globe, and especially in Japan. I mean, you'd think that homophobia would be eradicated in a country that produces so much queer entertainment. Well, I believe we all know that LGBTQ+ rights are not widely protected in Japan. Gay marriage is not allowed, gender reassignment is only allowed after surgery, non-binary identities are not recognized, conversion therapy is not banned, and there is no protection against housing, employment, and adoption discrimination. And even when there are some protections, this is not guaranteed for all Japanese prefectures. Obviously, Japan is not the only country to do this, and I'm not going to get too much into that discussion in this video, but I had to mention it because the answer to this oxymoron is kind of simple. BL is not always queer entertainment. It certainly can be, but a lot of BL is mainstream entertainment for heteronormative audiences. As in, that is who the industry is catering for. They don't care about the LGBTQ+ visibility, they just want to give the fans what they like. On the other hand, of course, gay men do watch BL, and they sometimes enjoy it. But what do they actually think of it? A study researching the opinions of Malaysian gay men on BL dramas revealed that not only do they watch it, but they enjoy it for the same reasons as any other viewer, regardless of gender and sexuality. For example, they might find the actors attractive, they enjoy the fantastical romance plotlines, and they find the eroticism better than usual heteronormative romances that tend to cater to the male gaze. However, they also had a lot of criticisms that stem from the misrepresentation of gay men in general. For instance, they criticized the lack of diversity among characters. Most of them are young, skinny, and pretty masculine, abiding by heteronormative patriarchal standards of male attractiveness. This means that there is only one type of person's experience portrayed in these dramas, the conventionally attractive gay man's. In addition, even though they enjoyed the escapism that BL dramas offered, they are not real stories of Malaysian gay love. Some of the participants stated that they would not show overt affection in public due to the stigma, which is something that BL couples have usually no problem doing. What these dramas show is the airbrushed, rose-tinted version of a gay relationship, even when they try to address homophobia within the show. Japanese gay men throughout the years have also expressed similar sentiments regarding the misrepresentation of their relationships in BL and especially Yaoi. It's also important to point out that any acceptance of gay love is technically welcome, but such limited portrayals could lead to the exclusion of non-conformity identities and their further stigmatization. If the attractive and masculine gay couple are considered the good and palatable ones, then where does that leave individuals who always felt that they were outside the margins of mainstream society and gender norms? Seems that they're still left outside the door. And finally, number 3, the beautiful boy is underage. Of course, I could not end without briefly discussing the issue of underage characters in BL and Yaoi. Japanese BL essentially started with the exploration of two underage boys' love for one another, two characters who are essentially children. In fact, the term boys' love is very literal, as in the most simple definition of boy is the underage male person. Their immaturity was often reinstated by their victimization by other adults. For example, in Kazetoki no Uta, Gilbert is being essayed by his uncle/guardian. This clearly indicates that the author was not trying to hide the fact that they were young, or even too young. This foundational link between BL and young characters has some cultural roots as well. A historic archetype for same-sex love in Japan was the relationship between a samurai and his younger companion, which can also explain why the Yuge and Seme relationship seems to often have hierarchical traits, like the Seme being the older, dominant person who teaches the delicate and naive Yuge about life and love. When the story includes an age gap relationship between an adult and a young adolescent, I would personally argue that there are always issues that could be discussed, especially when such story is written by an adult mangaka or writer. First of all, it reinforces a heteropatriarchal culture, and it fails to reconstruct gender, as the underage girl and adult man relationship is also one of the most criticized yet legitimized romance tropes in literature. Secondly, the age gap is often combined with incest as well as straight-up pedophilia with the shotakon trope. Also remember that a very common trope is that the Seme will essay the Yuke. Keeping all of that in mind, it becomes very clear that certain BL and Yaoi stories appeal to an audience that likes to fantasize about a relationship with taboo power asymmetries. The selling point for these stories is often the fantasy that a person can forcefully quote-unquote love somebody and a happily ever after can still be possible. These sorts of stories can certainly be criticized for two reasons. Number 1, the morality of writing incest, age gaps and essay as acceptable romance plotlines, and number 2, the exploitation of gay love. When I say that gay love is exploited, I mean that these audiences get their entertainment from an almost hedonistic portrayal of toxic love. We discussed earlier how women often read BL to escape the patriarchal oppression they might experience in their lives or read in heterosexual romance. Yet they enjoy fantasizing about similar themes when it involves gay men. Why is it easier to accept these harmful depictions in BL? Shouldn't it be hurtful to read about a person going through such abuse? Of course, everybody has different boundaries, and I know that there is such thing as like a morbid curiosity. But continually reading abusive interactions that are portrayed as sexually arousing has the potential of dehumanizing these characters and in turn their homosexual attraction. Finally, some stories do not try to enforce romantic age gaps, but they depict the love between two young boys. Now, is the depiction of Japanese adolescents being in love always problematic? Of course not. A lot of BL are not explicit at all, and even if they do imply that the boys are having a physical relationship, it is not always drawn in suspicious detail, let's say. I guess the main problem arises when the story openly depicts their physical intimacy. We can all agree that teenagers often explore their sexuality in real life, but well-regulated people do not want to witness it. Yet when it's depicted in fiction, there is no limit to what is portrayed. And not just in manga either. Entertainment media from most countries have no problem portraying teenagers doing the devil's tango, as Alex Myers would say. Just see Euphoria, Young Royals, Elite. This doesn't mean that it makes it okay, but BL manga tend to have a particular perverted reputation for doing the same thing as these shows' producers. I want to emphasize that I do not always agree with such portrayals, as they are often written and marketed toward adult audiences. This completely defeats the purpose of allowing teenagers to explore their sexuality, and it kind of makes this exploration a spectacle for adults. This is certainly a very hot topic online, as some people are against the consumption of explicit anime manga depicting teenagers, but such manga also have a lot of fans and defenders. Usually the defenders will point out that the characters are drawn and not real, but they also maintain that their enjoyment does not stem from sexual deviance. They maintain that reading such media appeals to their nostalgia, as they remember what it's like being a horny teenager themselves, or they simply read it for the non-explicit story parts. Of course, both could be true. There is a lot of nuance in those discussions, and in my opinion, it also depends on the specific manga and how the artist is depicting the relationship. I mean, personally, I prefer reading spicy manga about adults, as it's much easier for me to enjoy intimate stories about people with jobs rather than high school kids. I would end the discussion here, but I can't do that without addressing the cultural implications of manga depicting intimate teenagers. Young people, and particularly beautiful boys in BL, fulfill what is known as the kawaii character archetype. The innocent, naive character with sparkly eyes and a delicate physique. The kawaii character is more than a cute beauty, it's an unrealistically cute beauty. Japanese mangaka have used this character to represent a break from reality and a dive into escapism. Kawaii manga characters tread this thin line between realism and surrealism. Their bodies are proportionally fictional and undying, but they can also be written into situations that are relatable to the reader. For example, their deaths in manga can be traumatic and impactful because they are both propositionally impossible and artistically possible. Mangaka who wanted to explore taboo topics and queer experiences were able to do so by using the palatable kawaii characters. This ambiguous realism of queer manga can have both a positive and a negative impact on the actual LGBTQ community. On the one hand, it makes queer life and issues visible, and it makes queer bodies seductive and likable to readers. On the other hand, it can make queer life serve as purely fictional entertainment for the individual reader, which can undermine the LGBTQ+ activism. Queer people, their lives and their sexuality are not just a guilty pleasure book trope. It's also worth noting that Nagaike here specifically discusses male gay mangaka who created, well, let's say naughty manga inspired by the real queer erotic experiences. Of course, the manga included kawaii characters and ridiculous situations, so they are only semi-autobiographical, but the realism was still discernible. Nevertheless, even though the mangaka were gay men exploring their own sexuality, these manga were still mostly popular and promoted by women. The point I was trying to make here is that we see that the use of kawaii characters as a device to explore taboo topics, such as homosexuality, was always common and a core part of queer manga culture. Again, I'm not saying this to excuse the habit of drawing underage intercourse, but it would be too one-sided to ignore how the Japanese actually view these characters. The intent is not for them to be real people. The inherent dehumanization allows them to become pure fantasy subjects. In conclusion, it is not thus surprising that women, men, and non-binary folk can all enjoy BL despite not always sharing gender and sexuality with the main characters. It provides an escape from mainstream heteronormative romance, and lots of the time, they're just feel-good or dramatic romance stories that anyone would enjoy. However, we need to confront the not-so-positive aspects of BL and listen to how gay men may actually feel about it. A lot of the stories reinforce heterosexist norms and misuse toxic romance tropes, while the readers do not properly acknowledge the real-life consequences they can have. The female writers and readers of BL have to confront their own possible fetishization and exploitation of gay male love. Not because they are all guilty of it, but because they enjoy a type of media that has been guilty of using such love for profit, without consulting or giving back to gay men themselves. Nevertheless, it is an understatement that BL has a bad rep. Certainly, some BL is toxic and inappropriate, but so are other types of books, comics, and TV shows. The horror genre, for example, is known to repeatedly use heterosexist and racist tropes, but it is not as looked down upon as BL is. When Alice Oseman, author of Heartstopper, says that her work is not yaoi, I completely agree with her and I understand why she doesn't want that perception. But when she says that Heartstopper is not BL, well, why not? It's a romance story between two young boys written by a woman. Yes, a queer woman, but who says the Japanese mangaka are not queer either? My point is, the label BL has been unfairly tied to a sort of perverse fetish, when I would like to remind everyone that not all BL are explicit. BL has evolved beyond the Japanese manga industry and is now produced by diverse artists all around the globe. This means that it cannot be bound to outdated tropes and assumptions about its mangaka anymore. Thank you very much for watching. Please check out my Monogatari video if that's something you want to do, and I'll see you in the next one.